Greetings, foolish mortals, and welcome to the Movie Couple Channel. I am your host, Dustin.
I'm Wendy.
And this is our review for The Haunted Mansion. The Haunted Mansion is directed by Justin Simien and stars LaKeith Stanfield, Rosario Dawson, Tiffany Haddish, Owen Wilson, Danny DeVito, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Chase W. Dillon. A woman and her son who enlist a motley crew of so-called spiritual experts to help them rid their home of spiritual squatters. So The Haunted Mansion is the second adaptation of the popular ride at Disneyland. And whether you've been to Disneyland or not, The Haunted Mansion is one of the most beloved rides at Disneyland. And it holds a very special place in my heart because I've been going to Disneyland since I was a wee lad. And I just have to admit, when they said that they were bringing out a second one, a part of me was really excited. But of course, I was also very nervous because the last attempt didn't go over so well.
I don't really remember even the Eddie Murphy version of it. Like, I know I watched it, and I know I didn't like it. I mean, it came out a while ago, and I have not revisited it. So this is now an updated version, completely different storyline. The two, I don't believe, are even related at all. The only kind of common ground is that it is inspired by the ride, which is not just like the ride. I mean, obviously Disneyland was the first one to, have the ride, but that ride also exists at Magic Kingdom. A version of it is at Disneyland Paris, Tokyo Disney, as well as Hong Kong Disney. I'm not sure about Shanghai.
I think they all have their version of a Haunted Mansion too, except for like the one in Florida, the one here, and the one in Tokyo. Those are all very similar. Very, very similar. But all the other ones are either a little unique or very unique. Like the one in Shanghai, I think, is Mystic Manor. And it's completely different.
Yeah, it's got like a cute little monkey and like musical instruments. Anyways, there's tons of videos on YouTube for that. But this one, obviously our main character, aside from the human characters, the main character is the mansion. And I remember when we first looked at the trailers, I liked, at least in the trailer, how spooky it seemed like they were going to make this movie, with the scares and what the ghosts look like. And then when we actually watched the film, I realized that the trailer kind of made it seem like it was going to be Rosario Dawson and her sons, like their characters. I thought it was going to really revolve around them because they were the ones that moved into the house and they had to hire help to kind of like exercise the house. But once we started watching the movie, very quickly you realize that it is LaKeith's character's movie.
Yes, very much so. And I think finding that out kind of in the movie made us have to really shift about which character we're really focusing and paying attention to. I have to admit, they really do put together a very motley crew. This almost kind of had like, what is it called? Like a D&D party kind of vibe to it a little bit. So where it's more, even though you have your main characters, you do have so many other characters that are very a part of the crew.
Yeah, so we have obviously Gabbie and her son. They're the ones that unfortunately moved into this spooky home, but we also have LaKeith's character, Ben. We have Tiffany Haddish as the median. We have Owen Wilson as the priest. We have Danny DeVito, sort of like
the historian
and a couple other characters, but these are like the mainstay characters for this movie. What the story that they kind of gave us and why it's really centered more around LaKeith's character instead of anyone else's is aside from telling the story of the Haunted Mansion, it also tells the story of loss and grief. And that was something that I didn't expect. And I actually kind of appreciate them putting on a different spin, of what I thought it was going to be going in. I will say, though, at times, they would revisit the theme of the feeling of loss and grief, which is great, especially in the way that LaKeith performed his role. Like, he is such a standout in this film. Like, he is the one to watch. I mean, they're all good, but LaKeith really stood out to me. But sometimes they would, be in a really great scene about something in the mansion and the history of it, and then they'd all of a sudden switch over to, LaKeith's storyline, and it just felt too abrupt. So there was a weird tonal shift that made the whole thing kind of disconnected.
Yeah, and I have to admit, this movie does have a lot of really good moments. There are some that are very heartfelt. There are some that are actually really spooky and creepy. And there's just some that had some great character development in it and some great acting moments. But I have to agree is that the transitions between those moments felt really choppy. It felt like we were all really diving in to this character and this heart, and you just started to get the feels, and then something would kind of break the mood, and we'd be switching into a different, either something a little bit more comedic or something a little bit more spooky, instead of staying with that moment for a little bit longer. But overall, there were a lot of really different fun moments, different scary moments, and different just heartfelt moments that I really enjoyed in this movie.
Specifically, I think a lot of people who are excited for this film are probably, fans of the ride, whether it's the one here at Disneyland in Anaheim or in the Magic Kingdom. So there are so many Easter eggs and references to the ride. So if you are a hardcore, Disney park goer, you will notice a lot of them, and I think you're going to appreciate it, from not just like, say, Madame Leota, but like Constance, the stretching room, the endless hallway, so on and so forth. Anything that you can think of, it'll be in there. So I really appreciate that, kind of watching it come to life. As far as for the like level of scariness, I think a lot of people, because a lot of kids go to Disneyland, a lot of kids go on the ride. I don't think the ride itself is super scary. I went on it, the first time I went on it, I think I was probably like 7 or 8. And I remember my aunt who took me to the park was worried that I was going to be too scared. So she kept a really close eye on me, and I was just having a good time. She was like, okay, so for me, I wasn't too scared. I would say this movie does have some pretty decent jump scare moments. So I think maybe for like the 5 and 6 year olds, you might want to supervise them and kind of make the best decision based on them, whether or not you want to take them to see this movie, because some parts can get a bit scary. It's kind of, I would compare it to like a baby roller coaster for kids before they graduate into, like, for example, we made this reference in Megan, the horror film. Like that is for like young tween, like kind of okay.
Yeah,
maybe more teen, like 10, 11, not like 8.
If you want to start your kids getting into horror,
this
or
is
their
below
kids,
that.
Yes, very much.
Yeah.
If your kids can handle the ride, they can definitely handle this movie. There are some jump scares, some scary moments and tension, but it's not over the top. I would think that the ride is actually a lot scarier, because when you're in the darkness, and 2, there are some parts where it's really serious. Like the attic scene is very serious and very dark on the Haunted Mansion ride. And at the very beginning, when you're going through the hallway and you're seeing the one guy trying to get out of even that has a little bit of comedy to it. Overall, I find that the ride is a lot scarier, I think, than the movie.
You talked about the comedy, and we talked about a little bit sort of the tonal shift of the film and how sometimes it didn't work. So wanted to give you guys a little bit more an example. So there's a lot of, I would say, comedic actors in this movie. I feel like for me, a lot of Tiffany Haddish's stuff worked. Some of the comedy moments that didn't work for me, and I was very surprised, to kind of discover this, was the comedy moments with Owen Wilson and Danny DeVito. It just... Yeah. What happened was they would insert a couple of, like lighter moments or funny jokes right after a more heavy scene, but they did it so fast that it almost feels like it disregards that very emotional scene that we just had, just to laugh it off. I wish that they gave it a little bit, like just even like a moment to breathe before you break that tension. So the tonal shift felt very abrupt. The comedy didn't work too much for me in this movie. Like most of it was good, but a lot of it felt uneven. It felt like it was too cheesy.
Yeah, and I felt like a lot of it was also very unnecessary. I personally think that if you made this cast a little bit smaller and have been able to focus on just specific characters, I think you would have actually been able to get a lot more out of it. I feel like what they did with the characters of Danny DeVito's character and Owen Wilson's character kind of made them a little bit not needed, unnecessary. And all they really had in there were their comedic parts. And they definitely did their specialty. They definitely had the Owen Wilson special and the Danny DeVito special, the way that they presented these characters. So I feel like if they would have been able to focus more on the other four, I think you could have had a lot more of those moments. And some of the comedy seems like a little bit what they did with Eddie Murphy, where they hired Eddie Murphy to have that Eddie Murphy humor. They hired Danny DeVito and Owen Wilson to have their specific brand of humor in the movie. So I feel like they had the potential of really being able to tell these a much deeper story. But they wanted to play it safe with certain comedy to lighten the mood.
Yeah, like just in case it's too scary for kids, we got to have the funny in there, which it's just, and that's what we're talking about with the pacing and whatnot. It felt like it was all over the place, partially due to this. They also tried to insert a lot of history about the mansion and why all the ghosts are there, and I kind of love that too, but it kind of also created the problem of we were focusing on too many things. We were focusing on exercising the mansion, and we were focused on the character of Ben and his story, and then we have the Tiffany Haddish storyline sort of as well.
Yeah, and even the Madame Leota storyline, and Owen Wilson and Danny V. It was really all over the place. Yeah,
it was just too much. So while I had fun watching it, I also felt like everything felt a little too busy.
One thing that I also noticed is that the way this movie ended, it kind of fell into a pattern that I'm seeing Disney movies do, which Marvel definitely falls into, to where the ending is this big CGI special, to where it's like big action scene, the team comes together and fights the big baddie on this field of battle.
Would you say that in Ghostbusters Afterlife they did something similar as well at the end?
Yes, very something similar to that. And there's just a lot of different special effects, a lot of glowing special effects where everything is just lit weird and it's definitely not there because it's all going to be fixed in post. So I feel like that is something that kind of diminished a little bit of the value of what these villains, or whoever the villain was in the Haunted Mansion, and the way that the fight happened. I felt like it could have been a lot more personal if it was just the main characters.
They were so close.
They were so close.
They were so close.
Because even what some of the other characters were doing were pointless. I felt like it's kind of like the thing with Indiana Jones. If you remove Indiana Jones, the same events would have still happened. If you remove certain characters from this movie, the same events would have still happened. So I feel like they put in a little too much, like, let's put everything into this big blender of a bad guy fight. And with that being said, let's give you guys our ratings. If you guys don't know what our rating system is, it's actually down in the description below. Wendy, what did you think of The Haunted Mansion?
As a fan of the ride, I enjoyed all the Easter eggs and the references from the ride. Seeing that in the movie kind of coming to life on the big screen was particularly fun for me. As I said earlier, LaKeith is such a standout. Look, the cast is great. They're all seasoned actors. They know what they're doing, and they did exactly what they were hired to do. But LaKeith really touched on the emotional rawness that his character faced as far as, loss and grief goes, and I really enjoyed seeing that. At times I felt like I couldn't quite connect with the movie due to the pacing being all over the place. Certain moments that were meant to lighten the mood came a little too quick after a pretty emotional scene, would take me out of the moment. So I think for fans of the ride, you are going to really enjoy seeing this on the big screen. For me, my rating is matinee.
For me, LaKeith was definitely the standout in this movie. His story, his acting, I loved the way that was developed. And I would actually have loved to see it developed a little bit more. And the way that they incorporated the mansion, the look of it, like when he said the Easter eggs and all the things that you're like, oh, I know that, I've seen that. And to have that nostalgia really does help. And there's something that's just about it that I geek out about. But overall, yeah, the pacing, the choppiness, a lot of the unnecessary comedy and storylines that really didn't go anywhere. And I personally think the buildup of the mansion itself was kind of all done in like an exposition dump. And I felt like if we would have just had fewer characters to focus on and been able to tell this story in a little bit more of a flow, instead of having it be chopped up by either creepiness, which was done pretty well in some scenes, and some out of place comedy, this movie would have been a lot more enjoyable to watch. Overall, I think this is going to be a fun movie to see at home, and I'm going to give it a stream it. So what are your guys' thoughts on the Haunted Mansion? If you want, go ahead and put your comments down below. And also, what are some of the moments from the ride that is beloved to you, that you are just dying to see in the movie? Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.